Okay, so we're going to start with Daniel chapter 3. Last week, of course, we looked at chapter 2, where Daniel had the vision of, or Nebuchadnezzar had the vision, and then Daniel saw it and, interpreted it. But in any case, it was a statue with various kinds of metal. And then he told him, Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, well, this is representative of what's going to happen. So Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold, but the next kingdom was silver. And so Nebuchadnezzar, being who he is, I'm sure he wasn't happy about that particular idea, but nevertheless, that's what God told him. And so he's dealing with that issue in his mind. And then we come up now with chapter 3. And in chapter 3, you see something that this is, of course, one of the two most famous stories in the Bible, right? Anybody knows anything about Daniel knows about Daniel in the lion's den, or as Jim Cox was so wont to say, Daniel in the den of lions. and of course, the 3 Hebrew children in the fiery furnace, and that's what the story is. But there's far more to it than just that. I mean, not that that's not enough. Here's a genuine, unbelievable miracle that happens, recorded in Scripture, sir.
That's the question right here before I forget. Do we have any concept or idea of the time between chapter 2 and 3?
Not really.
Okay, no way to know, is there?
No, because we know one of the things we know about Daniel is, it's not contiguous. So we really don't know how long this is. But if you think about what Nebuchadnezzar accomplished here, no matter how good his folks were, metalsmiths, goldsmiths, whatever you want to call them, this is a large undertaking, huge undertaking. So, but the first thing that comes to my mind when I move from chapter 2 to chapter 3 is, why did he do this? And of course, what he did, I just call it Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue, a reaction to a vision. My personal opinion, this is my personal opinion. So let's do one thing before we do that. If you remember, there were 6 conflicts in this book that we talked about in the first 6 chapters. And this is the third one. It's between heathen idolatry and loyalty to God. And of course, loyalty to God wins, as we well know. But so we won't take time to read all the scripture, just for time's sake. Not that it's certainly not worthwhile. Please do that if you haven't done it. But in chapter 3, verse 1, Daniel tells us, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits, and its width was 6 cubits. Now, if a cubit is 18 inches, which typically it's considered to be, 60 cubits is 90 feet tall. So it was 90 feet tall, and it was 6 cubits wide, so that means it's 9 feet wide. That is a huge, obviously it is, but can you imagine the amount of time it took to, don't know whether it was cast, don't know whether it was made of a different kind of metal and overlaid with gold. We really don't know any of that. The scripture doesn't say it's solid gold. He just says it's golden statue. The actual act of doing that shows that Nebuchadnezzar was absolutely committed to this. And then you have to ask yourself, why? Why did he do this? Especially if it's anytime soon after chapter 2. And of course, understanding his personality and who he is and what his government looks like. He is the ultimate autocrat. And if you look at those kinds of people, those dictators that have risen through history, almost invariably, either they themselves or the state that they represent becomes God. And you can look at any one of a number of those kinds of people who go through, who flow through history. The Romans, for example, right? Caligula had himself not only declared God, but his horse declared God. Of course, Caligula wasn't playing with the full deck, but he required the people bow down and worship. So did Nero. And that's one of the reasons that the Christians were killed in the arena, is the fact that they would not do that. And all they really had to do was denounce the Christian faith, and they could have lived, and they didn't. All these guys had to do was to denounce their faith. So we'll talk more about their situation in a minute. But he set it up on, and then the scripture says he set it up on the plain of Dura. The plain of Dura, depending on who you listen to, is somewhere very close to Babylon City proper. It could even be encompassed in Babylon City proper, but there's no evidence, hard evidence that it was. It could have been just outside of it. What's important about that is he chose the plain for a specific reason, and that is you could see it forever. And he set it up there.
And the work that goes into this, I don't know how they would have casted it upright. They would have had to cast it laying down and then raise that heavy thing up.
Yep.
And again, today's technology can't even figure out how to do that. And they have ropes and logs and sand.
Yeah, well, they were awfully good at what they did. They were awfully good mathematicians. They probably figured a way out without a lot of problem. Well, I don't know about a lot of problem. You couldn't drop it though, could you? That'd be a bad deal. You know, you don't get a do-over in that deal. But in any case, it's fascinating how this story goes. This part of the story is the one that we kind of just skip over, or typically, do we not? I mean, you just kind of read through there and say, yeah, he was a heathen, he was a pagan, so he set up this statue. Was it a statue of himself? Scripture doesn't say it's a statue of himself. It just says it was a statue that he had cast out of gold or made out of gold, but it represented to him something that must be worshiped, whether that was the Babylonian government and all that it entails, including himself, or himself personally. The scripture really doesn't say, but there are some hints in there. And then he calls all these people together. And if you look at the scripture here, there's a list of folks that he calls together. So he set up this thing, and he commanded that, of course, everybody bow down and worship when they heard the music. We'll get to the music in a minute. But in any case, it's a shame you can't see this. I did this just for you, Jeff. But in any case, I will read you what I wrote. So it says, then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent word to assemble and then he goes into this group of people, satraps. I suppose that's how one would pronounce that. That's not somebody we normally know. So what that is, that particular official, the dictionary says that he was in charge, or that person was in charge of the land that he owned as an administrator, and found himself, hang on just a second, let me move this out of the way, found himself surrounded by an all but royal court. He collected taxes, controlled the local officials and the subject tribes and cities, and was the supreme judge of the province, before whose chair every civil and criminal case came. So that's a pretty significant person. The next one is a prefect, and there's some discussion about what prefects did. Typically, prefects were the military leaders. There was somebody that was in charge of the military in a particular area. This person says it's an official lower in rank than the previous in the Babylonian government. In the Bible, prefects were in a position of authority over the wise men in the Babylonian courts. Prefects are also mentioned during the rule of King Darius the Mede, and that's in Daniel 6:7. But typically prefects, apparently, because they still use that term in the Roman Empire, typically what they apparently were they were in charge of the military. Now, obviously, the soothsayers and all that group were not military people, but in any case, that's not as important as the fact that So he's gone from the ruling official in the particular area to the head of the military. And then he lists governors. Well, we know what governors are, and these acted pretty much in the same fashion. So we're going down the list. Can you see that there's a hierarchy here? And so we're going down that hierarchy. So he started with the ultimate ruler in that particular area, went to the next ruler, then he went to the governors, then he went to the counselors. Well, we know who the counselors are, right? They're the Chaldeans and the soothsayers and the magicians and astrologers and all that group. And then he went to the treasurers. I found that interesting that he commanded the treasurers to be part of this. But if you start looking at the governmental structure here, what you're seeing is all the branches of the Babylonian government represented without anybody being left out. Then he asks for the judges, or commands the judges, and they ask for anybody. The magistrates, well, magistrates work under the judges, right? They still do. And then finally, he has this catch-all phrase at the end. It says, all the rulers of the provinces. So it wasn't just one place, it was all of them. But this is sort of like and anybody else we forgot. And I put a note in here, this note's for me more than anybody else, but note that these weren't the common people. They were the leadership of the Babylonian government. So you see the head of the Babylonian government, Nebuchadnezzar. Then you see, let's say, his cabinet, if you will, right? If you'll allow me to say that. So we have the satraps, we have the prefects, we have the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So every aspect of the Babylonian government is actually represented here. The first thought that comes to my mind, or the first question that comes to my mind is, where's Daniel? Because Daniel is the man among men, all right? Well, we'll come to him in a minute. And John Lennox talks about where Daniel is in this thing. Anything we say is conjecture, right? So these are the people that the call went out to. And I have the next slide is titled The Command. And the first line is when the praise band plays. Because this was their praise band, wasn't it? Yeah. Now, one of the things I've always appreciated about Jeff Sams and the people who play with him is where his heart is, right? You probably don't remember this, but we were somewhere playing and singing. I don't remember where. And you know, there are people who would, maybe I shouldn't use the term false modesty, but there are people who would denigrate themselves on stage. Well, I'm no great singer and I don't really want to sing and the Lord forced me to do it, right? And Jeff Sams said, I'd sing on the steps of the White House if they'd let me. He said, attaboy, brother. And it's because it's an opportunity to share the gospel, to minister, right? I mean, I like playing music too, and I've played lots of different kinds of music in lots of different kinds of places. And, you know, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy interacting with crowds and all that, but that's not necessarily ministry. And music is a powerful force. There's a reason why he had this band here.
Yeah. Bells and whistles.
Yeah, he's got all kinds of.
I thought that he branded his image. If you were looking at this in marketing terms,
yeah,
he branded his image, and then he gets all the people of influence to bow down to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he's got, you know, he's bowing them.
Yeah,
He's working toward making himself a god.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I thought it was interesting when I looked at the various and sundry instruments here. I'm okay with the horn and the flute and the lyre, I guess. I don't know what a trigon or trigon is. Psalteries, you'd have to have heard the sermon of the Peasel tree to understand that one. A bagpipe. Who in the world has a bagpipe in their praise band?
Very Scottish.
And all kinds of music. All right. So when you heard the music, why music? Why do you think he did that? Yeah, he branded it what he was doing, but why did he choose this? He could have chosen anything, but he chose this to be the herald, if you will.
Mhm.
And
The trigon is a triangular lyre, and the psaltery is a type of harp.
good.
So what's a bagpipe?
Bagpipe's a bagpipe.
It's a double reed instrument,
It's a reed
whether
instrument.
it's the same as what, because the sackbut
Mhm.
is a trombone.
NLT just says pipes. So,
We have anything from flutes to clarinets to actual bagpipes to trumpets.
Yeah.
Well, trombones and so, anything in that category.
Yeah. So anyway, music is a powerful force, and it can be a force for good and it can be a force for evil. But music affects people. And I mean, that's why they have mood music, for example.
One of the greatest emotional manipulators is music.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, you can take this really started, well, I don't know when it started, but I was thinking specifically about rock music, and how in the late 50s and 60s, you know, it's got that great beat to it. And the music was, you know, for the most part was good. I mean, some wasn't all good. By good, I mean the musicianship was good, but you don't pay much attention to the words. And I still tend to do that. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a musician, but when I listen to a new CD or something of that nature, or whatever it is, I hear a new song, I really don't hear the words going through. You know, I'm listening for chord changes and, you know, fills and runs and the interplay of the instruments and all that. After about 4 or 5 times of listening to it, I really start paying attention to what the words say. But the words are there. They are.
Sometimes you catch it on the first time when it's a,
Mhm.
and you,
Yeah,
I just hear that.
yeah. Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, I am creative writer. I go for both because that creativity, I listen for that beat, for that music, for that mesh, you know, everything goes together, but also the words.
Yeah.
If I don't like the words, that beat cannot override that in my head.
That's good, because that's not true of everybody. A lot of people ignore the words and listen to the music, listen to the beats. And that's why I said what I said. You know, I mean, I try not to listen to
Well,
music that's got negative.
it's all in how you're wired.
It is.
You know, your creativity is the musical side. My creativity is the word side.
Yeah.
The vocabulary, the verbiage. That's where I hone first, and then music flows right in. So for me, if I pick up something that I don't like, gone. That's it. I mean, there's never a coming back.
Yeah. Well, good.
Something else I've always wondered about, this being on the plain of Dewar, you're not gonna have a 5-10 piece band that's gonna be heard. It's gonna be hundred.
Wow.
And they didn't have tuning slides, I'm sure, and the quality of the instruments. I mean, your strings you could tune maybe, but I'm hearing it, and I'm hearing, ooh, oh, wow, that's a racket.
Yeah. But of course, to them, that's what they knew. So,
Yeah.
so it's what they liked.
Everybody
But-
on 3.
Yeah. What I'd actually written here was, while the edit may have been bothersome to some, and there were some people, I'm sure, because these are not all Chaldeans. They're not all Babylonians. They're from everywhere. You know, they've got folks there from all over the world being the Babylonian Empire, of course. The music was designed to placate the fears and change the mood. And that's exactly what happens, right? That's why you never hear, you go listen to that elevator music, that canned stuff in grocery stores or wherever else, and it's all that, it's alike.
You don't hear the thing, the jaws.
No, you don't. You never do. You don't, I shouldn't, I'm not gonna say that. One of my other, that's some misspent youth, but anyway, but it did have something to do with Eric Clapton.
Where did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fit in all those names? Were they included in everybody else thing, or?
No, I don't think so. I think they were probably up at the top.
So,
Because
He was
if
in
you-
charge of Babylon, wasn't
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, they had been promoted, if you will, at the request of Daniel, and they were in control of provinces and so forth. And so they could very well have been slave traps. But there were personages of importance, and we'll see how important here just in a minute when you see their encounter with Nebuchadnezzar. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar is an absolute monarch. Whatever he says, that's the law. And if he says, you do this and I'm going to do that, you do that, he'll do that because that's who he is. And he sometimes is a little volatile. Often he's a little volatile, sometimes a lot volatile, but he's still, I mean, he's the man.
I know
And-
how it is with me. I'm teaching little kids in PE and tell kids to go run 3 laps. No, I get volatile.
Yeah.
But if I was the king, if I was the king of an empire and somebody said no to me, yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, there's nothing.
Especially if you're not eating, your sugar's low.
Yeah.
You'll be about 15 statue done.
Yeah. There is nothing more revealing than dealing with kids.
Yes.
I mean, it just is what it is. But you know, I remember at the end of my coaching career, and this has nothing to do with Daniel at all. But at the end of my coaching career, I'm doing what Greg was wanting to do on Sunday, right? When you wanted to talk about something different. But I decided I'd go back and coach middle school because I didn't have 40 hours a week to coach varsity football anymore. I had too much job. And I had started coaching what we call junior high then, 8th and 9th graders in Eastern Virginia back in the 70s. And so, and yes, I am 100 years old. So I decided I'd go back there. I had forgotten how they are. It's a brand new world every day for them. There is no carryover from yesterday. And so we were out there one day talking about defensive fronts and all that kind of stuff. And I told them, I said, listen, every defensive coordinator you have ever met or will ever meet is crazy. We're all insane. And the reason that's true is you. You're the reason I'm insane. When I was an offensive line coach, I could carry on a conversation. Now I can't do anything but scream at people. You can't even line up right. And for those of you who are football fans, I don't know if any of you are football fans, okay. So I had this kid playing for me. He was playing defensive nose, right? So we're in an odd front. He's playing. So I said to him, and this is a kid that's got like a 5.9 grade point average. You know, he's one of those kids. And anyway, I said to him, I said, okay, your eyes on eyes, nose on nose, toes on toes with the center. What is that called? And he looked at me. And of course, the answer is we're in an odd front. So it's any odd front that you have. That's all I wanted from him. I want him to look at me and say odd front. He said, cover 3. I said, son, you're a fat man. He puts his hand on the ground. Never use the word cover. It has nothing to do with you whatsoever. It's the defensive backs that need to know, and the linebackers need to know about covers. You don't need to know about anything but that guy right there, him. I said, okay, you take a step down, one step down, and you're playing on the inside shoulder of the guard. Now what front are you in? And he said, cover 2. And I said, you can't be that dumb. You're playing me. And the kid said, no, he really is. I said, you can't say that. I can. But boy, nothing like working with kids, is it? So if you refused Nebuchadnezzar's command, it was over with. Not only was it over with for you, it was over with for your family, your home, your whatever. Now, thinking that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are men of importance, because they are, they have a tremendous decision that they're going to have to make. Now, we know where they are. We know where their hearts are. But just stop a minute and take a step back. Can you not imagine, like Job's wife talking to him, that some of their family members said, look, all you got to do, I mean, it's just a pagan god. It doesn't mean anything. There's nothing real about that. He just set it up. There's nothing to that. All you got to do is just bow down. And they said, nope, not going to do that. And then we find the Chaldeans, the people whose lives they had saved. The Chaldeans brought charges against the Jews. This is what Scripture says, stating that they, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, had disregarded the king. You really think they disregarded the king? Now, disregarded is a pretty strong term. And he's the king of the universe at this point in time, as far as where their universe is, if you know what I mean, without going into the hyper spiritual world. They didn't disregard him. They disagreed with him, which is even worse. But that's what the Chaldeans say. Now, the Chaldeans don't have a lot of clout with the king. He's already threatened to kill them because they can't. He says, you guys just get together and make your mind up and come up with some kind of cock and bull story and tell me what you think I want to hear. And that was the whole crux of what happened with his vision previously. So what does Nebuchadnezzar do? Did he kill them on the spot? Yes or no?
No.
No.
No discussion.
Nebuchadnezzar, that's 100% answer. Go to the other class. But what he did was he called them in. That says something about their stature in the kingdom and in Nebuchadnezzar's mind. So he gave them, in reality, he gave them another chance, which he certainly didn't have to do, and probably with anybody else wouldn't have done. And he calls them to task for it. He says, hey, this is what I heard. And they said, well, we're not bowing down. And of course, I love his phrase. He then gave him a second chance, but stated, what God is there who can deliver you out of my hand? That says to me that this whole statue business was about them worshiping Nebuchadnezzar. Because he very specifically states, you're in my hand. There is no God bigger than me. I mean, that's exactly what it says.
Whatever impact Daniel's interpretation had has faded.
Yeah. So
Actually,
that
it's increased if you think about it, because now there's the statue of gold.
Yeah, but
You kind of wonder if that's not stemming from it. I know where Donnie's coming from, but
Yeah.
yeah, Daniel's influence of saving the Jews and making Nebuchadnezzar humble and thankful. That all is gone, like this could be the next day at this point. But it turned a complete 180 from where it should have been.
Mhm.
Nebuchadnezzar forgot all that humbleness and went straight back to, I'm the head of gold. Hey.
yeah, except now he's the gold.
Now he's
He
the
is
whole
the
gold.
gold. Yeah, he's the
I think the
man.
vision could have startled him to a point of thinking, I've got to really get my act together as a king, and so I'm gonna lean into the power of
I think so.
my being. And
Yeah, I think really what he was, what we see here was his reaction
yeah,
to chapter 2, to the vision that he had seen. Well, if it's only the head on that statue, here it's the whole thing.
yeah.
I am the king, and who's going to deliver you out of my hand? And
Winston Churchill, power corrupts, total power corrupts totally.
mhm.
So he has total power, he's totally corrupt.
Yeah, and that so-called conversion that he had in chapter 2 wasn't real, was it? Because he never really did say that God is the only God. He just said he's a God among gods. He's my new number one guy.
We got him in the pantheon, right?
Yeah, he just added him. He's just another. And there's evidence of lots of different religions where they have, voodoo's a prime example of that, where they have taken a little bit of Christianity and a whole lot of paganism and put it together and made another religion. And there's all kinds of them. It's not just that, but
He's the man, and he don't have to worry about saving face. But when I was looking at there, these these Chaldeans that came in and accused him, it was kind of, I guess, a bold statement on their part. He said, these Jews that you put in charge,
Mhm.
you know, and so he calls them in and like to kind of coerce them, coax them a little bit more. It's kind of a thing of saving face,
Mhm.
which is really funny when he sees himself as this all powerful.
Yeah. You know,
I
it's-
think he was trying to.
I think the Chaldeans were so jealous of their loss of position because they've been demoted. They're no longer where they were because Daniel is put in charge of them. So now they got a Jew, Daniel, and 3 more guys who were part of that whole dream sequence, if you will. And they, of course, they knew that. I mean, it's not like they were living in a vacuum. And they saw it as clearly their opportunity to remove the competition. And he didn't have any confidence in what they said. That's why he called them in. Because he didn't believe them. At least there was doubt in his mind. Maybe, you know, whatever. But then we see, you know, these guys stand and they said, what any of us would love to be able to say, given that same situation, because they're in a difficult situation. Can you imagine what their mental, and Lennox talks about it, what their mental anguish is like? I mean, they're going to die, and they know they're going to die, and not only are they going to die, their families are going to die, and they're going to wipe them from the face of the earth. That's what all that stuff means. And yet they stood up before the king and they said, you know, our God can deliver us, and he may not. But even if he doesn't, we're not bound down. And of course, that's the same. And he makes it, Greg, did you read that statement about the number of martyrs that there were in that?
That is,
I
mean, I've read it. But
Yeah.
I don't
Well, he was saying that in a period of time, Lennox was saying in a period of time from something like 2000 to 2010, there were over 1 million Christian martyrs, new Christian martyrs. And, you know, we just don't see that.
Yeah, there's 270 new martyrs every 24 hours over the past decade.
Mhm.
That's a lot of crowns going out, isn't it?
And that's from 2000 to 2010.
Yeah,
Was approximately, yeah, it's hard to imagine.
it is.
China,
1 million.
Indonesia, Malaysia.
It is.
Most of the countries in
1 million.
Africa.
I had a good friend in Charlotte who was from Liberia, and it was his home church where all those people were slaughtered on a Sunday morning. And the only reason he wasn't there was he was sick. And he and his brother were at home. They didn't go to church that Sunday morning, or they'd also been killed in that thing. And it happens all the time. All the time.
China's so afraid right now that if you leave a cross beam on a building exposed, government cuts it down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, yeah.
A further indication of the importance of these 3 guys to Nebuchadnezzar in verse 15 says, now, if you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a kid says no to me, I say, you do what I say now. I don't say, when you're ready, you do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. You know, so this is the part of the story that we begin to know. And the king followed through with his threat. I mean, it wasn't like he didn't do it. He told him he was going to do it, and he did do it. So if you could see this powerful one, you would see. Y'all online, just hold on. I'm going to turn this around. Don't get seasick.
Christmas is a time for visiting with your loved ones and friends, but for some people, it's not quite that simple. Earlier this year, I visited nursing homes, retirement centers, even went into a couple of prisons. The meaning of my next song deals with setting spirits free, because at those places I made some friends and came to know more a little bit more about what it can be like for people who live a confined life. We've all heard the story about the three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were relegated to a terrible place. Well, this song is about the fourth man, the one who set their spirits free. If you're going to spend this Christmas confined for one reason or another, this song is dedicated to you. And if you're somebody who will make that confinement a little pleasanter, someone whose visit can really make a Merry Christmas, then this song is dedicated to you too. Here is a story from the Bible that we know, a story about a miracle that happened long ago. We hope you can find courage when temptations you might meet. Oh, there's somebody watching who's strong when you're weak. They wouldn't bend. They wouldn't bow. They would not bow the knees to the idols they go. They wouldn't burn. They were protected by the fourth man in the fire. They wouldn't bend. They wouldn't bow. They wouldn't burn. Well, the prophet Daniel tells about three men who walk with God, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Before the wicked king they stood. Now the king commanded them bound and thrown into the fiery coals that day. But the fire was so hot that the men were slain that forced them on the way. They wouldn't bend. They held on to the will of God, so we are told. They wouldn't bow. They would not bow the knees to the idols they know. They wouldn't burn. They were protected by the fourth man in the fire. They wouldn't bend. They wouldn't bow. They wouldn't burn. When the three were cast in, the king rose up to witness their awful fate. He began to tremble at what he saw, and in astonished tones he spake. Did we not cast three men bound into the midst of the fire? I believe I see four men unheard of bound and walking down there. I see Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and the fiery coals they tried. But the form of the fourth man that I see is like the Son of God. They wouldn't bend. They held on to the will of God, so we are told. They wouldn't bow. They would not bow the knees to the idols they know. They wouldn't burn. They were protected by the fourth man in the fire. They wouldn't bend. They wouldn't bow. They wouldn't burn. They wouldn't bend.
There you go. We go home now. Yeah. Yeah.
Stacy and Matthew got to see him the last time he sang, singing Happy Birthday to you.
All right, here's a
We retired, we didn't do it. Summer staff.
It's amazing when you can sing lead, but you can also sing the bass lead on the chorus. You know, if you're Johnny Cash, you can do both of those and just keep moving. So, you know, of course, we know the story, right? This is one of the two most famous stories out of Daniel, the other one being the lions. But it was exactly what that song said. He looked down into the furnace and it already killed the guys that he set out to push the people in because it was intense. And scripture says he heated it hot because he was hot. He was hostile. And they didn't do what he wanted them to do, so he got back at them.
He gave them that second chance and said, if you're ready, and then they said, I don't care. We're not going. And that really, so again, kids, they can push my buttons.
Yeah.
And my kids.
Sure.
And there's a big button, they push.
Yeah.
They push me hard.
Yes, they did. And
It looked like him, Mr. Perfection, had made a mistake by putting him in the position.
well, you know, true.
Yeah.
And over and above that, these are the first, you know, he ruled by power and fear. The only time people are afraid of somebody is, I shouldn't say it that way, but the fear factor here is the fear of losing your life. Now he's got 3 guys standing in front of him who aren't afraid of him, and he doesn't know what to do with them. And they, you see that over and over again, and particularly in the Roman Empire, when it was all that persecution going on, they didn't know what to do with them because they ruled the same way. It was fear and intimidation. And now all of a sudden they see people who say, no, we're not afraid of him. We're not going to do that. They killed them, and another group came along and said, we're not going to do that. They killed them, and another group came along and said, we're not going to do that.
This was not an act of defiance in a sense of, it looked like defiance, but it wasn't. It was an act of conscience.
Mhm.
That the only rule of absolute would be God, and he's got absolute rule of our conscience. And, to him, it looked like you've got dissonance now in the kingdom that people aren't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
fighting
true.
right. But it wasn't like an attitude, we're gonna show you.
No,
It's easy to get an attitude like that.
yeah. But that kind of attitude,
More of an allegiance and a devotion to God.
in my opinion, this is my opinion, that arrogant attitude won't stand when it comes down to losing your life. It just won't. These guys did what they did because of who they were and who they knew. And they had made that decision, as you said, a long time before, not on the spur of the moment. And of course, the scripture says, and I said, Nebuchadnezzar's reaction was predictable. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who put their trust in him. I think I missed the word. They're violating the king's decree, the king's command, yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship the God except their own God. And he was impressed with this after he saw the miracle, not before. Therefore, I decree, this is another one of his decrees. It's not the first one, and it won't be the last one. I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver this way. He didn't say there wasn't any other God. He just said, here we are back to number one again, Yeah, I forgot about him, but I got him back now. The king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to prosper in the province of Babylon until the next time. And of course we don't hear much about these guys after this, but nothing actually. But we don't need to. So this is the epitome of, and I think about that. I may have told you this story before, but in the hiding place, Corrie ten Boom is talking to her father. She's a young woman, and she's very concerned about all this whole thing that they're doing. They're hiding Jews from the Nazis in Holland, and they know it's a matter of time. And she was very concerned. She went to her father and she was talking to him about it. And he said, Corrie, when we get on the train, when do I give you your train ticket? She said, well, just before we get on the train. He said, that's how God prepares us. When you need him, he will be there. And then if you read her story, you know what happened. There are a lot of people who have come up, millions of people who have come up against this same thing and have lost their life. God decided that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be delivered. I think this is my personal opinion. I think he did this quit beating around the bush, because he wanted to show Nebuchadnezzar who he was. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego already knew who he was, and they were committed to him. So why else would he have done this? And he did it specifically to show Nebuchadnezzar what's going on and who he is.
And at the same time, because of the gathering of people, it was a witness to all the leadership.
Absolutely. So the collateral damage is all the people around. And I actually finished this, come on, help me out. I actually finished this PowerPoint presentation with the quote from Jim Elliott. And most of you have heard this quote before, but Jim Elliott said, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose." Jim Elliott was in his early 20s when he wrote that. He had just graduated from Wheaton College in 1949. And of course, Jim Elliott's story. He was one of a number of missionaries in Ecuador that were killed by the Aqua Indians on the beach. And here's the extension of that story. Elizabeth Elliott and a couple of the other ladies went into that village and ministered to those people. And it was a long process, and it didn't happen overnight. And they had the influence of one of the local girls who was, who had become a Christian and had known them. So they went in and ministered to these people. And as a result, many of them became Christians. Jim Elliott's daughter was baptized in the river on the same beach by the man who killed him. He had become the minister of the local congregation in that village. And I heard that from a fellow named Phil Renix. And Phil Renix was at the time, the head of missions for ACSI, Association of Christian Schools International. And he knew the man personally. He had been the headmaster at Quito Academy, at Alliance Christian Academy in Quito, Ecuador. But it's this kind of dedication that's unique in the sense that, not that people aren't unique to not that people aren't committed to what they believe. I don't mean to say that. There have been martyrs who were Buddhists. There have been martyrs who were Muslims. There have been martyrs who were lots of different things. But they're faithful to pagan gods. This is the God. And of course, as soon as we say that, it makes us closed-minded. And if that's what closed-minded is, write my name down in the book under closed-minded. I'm not closed-minded. I'm hope to be God-minded. These guys were that. And this had to have a powerful effect on Nebuchadnezzar, but it didn't change his heart, did it? Nebuchadnezzar's had at least 2 encounters where he's declared God to be the God, but it's the top God, just one of another. And it's sad when you see it happen, but there are people in this world who make so-called professions of faith, but they're never really saved because there's no change. And John says the reason you can't tell the difference in them is because there is no difference in them. And, we don't really like to deal with that, but nevertheless, it's true. I'm always reminded of my father-in-law, Leo Stidham. For those of you who knew Leo, several people here did. He was quite a character. And somebody said to him one day, "Leo, did you hear about old so-and-so?" And Leo said, "No, what happened to him?" "Well, he got saved at the revival," they said. And Leo said, "He's been baptized so much that fish know him by his first name." So chances are that wasn't the real deal. But God put this, there's a reason why this story's here.
Could it be, I'm just going to throw this out, because it takes me back to our Bible Institute days. And could it be that God was preserving a godly remnant?
I think so. Absolutely.
And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego they were representatives of that remnant. Eventually that Messiah would come through, but that just popped in my head from about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Y'all remember that?
Yeah. I was there that night.
Were you there?
I didn't miss any
We had a
class.
lot of talks after class.
Yeah, we did.
It was good.
Yeah.
After class was a better class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
That's why you get home 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I read across some really neat commentary. I can't remember where I read it, but said, the Jews their capital punishment was they stoned people and the Romans crucified people.
Mhm.
And the Babylonians burnt people.
Yeah.
And they actually worshiped fire.
Yeah.
So it was really a slap in the face to their
Oh, that's good.
gods and religion that it was fire that was defeated in this story. I thought that was just really cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
cool.
it just jumped out, you know, I read that, and wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And how like God to do that.
Mhm.
It was like in your face, Deb. You know?
Yeah.
Well, the same was true. Donnie had gone through this in the study with Exodus and the plagues. Those plagues represented particular gods
Yeah.
that. You remember that?
I got a question. In chapter 1, it says that these guys were turned over to the prince of the eunuchs.
Mhm.
Did Daniel and these other three, did they have to become eunuchs?
Apparently,
And I mean castration,
yes.
so they've lost their manhood as well as everything else.
Yeah. Okay, that seemed to be the modus operandi. And so then you ask yourself, well, what kind of family can they have? Well, it's not necessarily wife and children. It's whoever's in their household. Could be their mother and father, could be, which it wasn't because they'd been taken from them. But you see what I'm saying? It was, could very well have been extended family.
But the Babylonians kept phenomenally detailed records.
Mhm.
They could have done a vertical backward lineage. The Babylonians, the Romans were meticulous with
Yeah.
record keeping. So they could have backtracked. They would have known who brothers and sisters, who mother and father. They very easily, if they couldn't have produced a downward line, they could come back up their line easily.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that they held over their captives was, we know who your family is, we've documented
Mhm.
the households from which you came.
Like the mafia.
Now tell
Let me
us
have a
who
look.
Daniel was.
Hmm?
Now tell us who Daniel was.
Well, Lennox, who's a whole lot smarter than me, says anything that we can say is conjecture. So he says there's 3 options. One of the options was he had been sent somewhere out of the country or out of the immediate area.
Like an ambassador.
And yeah, like an ambassador, something of that nature. And so he really wasn't there. The second option is that he bowed down and worshiped. And we know him well enough to know that's not true. And the third option basically was Nebuchadnezzar exempted him.
He was running the soundboard.
Yeah, he's running the sound.
Anything on the soundboard. Oh.
He wasn't picking and singing. But so the answer is, we don't know where he was. But we know Daniel well enough by now to know he definitely didn't bow down.
Yeah, he could have been doing the light show. I mean, that could have been part of it too. He's talking about
Yeah.
fog machine.
The band probably didn't bow, so maybe he was in the band.
He could have.
It'd be a little hard to play bagpipe laying down, wouldn't it? Or anything else I can think of except for, that Back to the Future story where he crawls across the stage playing guitar and Johnny B. Good. That's simple. Yeah, we know that already. Okay, so any other questions or comments or anything else?
I've got something real quick. It just now struck me. Because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego apparently did this so quietly. Word had not gotten to Nebuchadnezzar, but would they not have been in his court to stand anyway? They did this so discreetly that the Chaldeans had to go tattle. That's what so struck me is they should have been in this group in the court.
Well, they could have
There should
been.
have been so many people to have seen this. But it seems to have been done, they seem to have just done this so discreetly that the only people that bugged were the Chaldeans.
Yeah.
The Chaldeans were like, daddy, they're not doing this.
And it could be, but then again, since since they are who they are,
Yeah.
they could very well not have been in the city of Babylon proper. They could have been out in the outlying districts where they were all assigned to something else.
But
But
he had all his rulers and all of their underlings.
He
to
brought 'em all.
report during
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
And that's the thing that got me just
Yeah.
now, I don't know, I had noticed, was like, wait a minute. The Chaldeans had to go tattle.
yeah,
They just did this so casually that like everybody just kind of left it alone except the Chaldeans.
yeah. Well, they're, you know,
They're
I don't-
special. They're
They are,
special.
they are special. You know? There's always a group that are special.
No touch.
They're special, and we don't mean that in a good way either. Bless their little hearts, as we say here in the South. This is a fascinating story, the whole thing, from why, and we still don't know why Nebuchadnezzar did that, other than he apparently was reacting to the dream that and the description thereof, that his kingdom was going to end. So in his mind, if he became the god that everybody had to worship, or at least we think, I mean, again, this is conjecture, that he was, you know, basically eternal. Who
He would
knows?
Consolidate his kingdom now and forever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He
And
probably got his wish though, because, I mean, it's not the way he wanted it, but we're still reading about him all these generations
Oh,
later,
sure.
just not the way he wanted it to
Yeah.
go.
but he was you know, if you go back and look at his life, Nebuchadnezzar II was the premier Babylonian king.
Mhm.
He had, I mean, the stuff that he did in Babylon, just the architecture and all the building and all those. And then you think about the government, and how complex that government was, and the fact that he was sending people back to their home countries that they had trained, and all the record keeping, everything that was, and he had part and parcel of everything, because he is the supreme ruler. He is the man.
He is Babylon.
He is Babylon.
He wasn't just another dumb jock or another dumb soldier.
No, he definitely wasn't that. And we're going to see in the next chapter, Nebuchadnezzar's downfall and then his restoration. And chapter 4 is written partly by Nebuchadnezzar in Aramaic, which was the franca lingua. It was the language of the land, of the kingdom. Anybody else?
Lennox drew a good point in the book on the, I guess, the move philosophically. And that is that he was trying to absolutize the relative.
Mm-hmm.
You think about where we're at today in relativism, there's no absolutes, but and we know that that's not true.
Yeah, that's an absolute statement.
Yeah, that's an absolute statement. But the absolute power was what he was after.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that power is what everybody's after. Everybody, meaning all the people who are headed in that direction. I don't mean that the way it sounds, but
Yeah.
okay. So, if you would, before you get here next week, read chapter 4. And we'll see what happens to Nebuchadnezzar. He has some would say he had a mental breakdown. Well, what he had was God-induced. Definitely had a mental problem, but it was God-induced. And then how he reacts to that. This may be as genuine as anything that he has said before, or more genuine than anything he said before about that. And here we see his final realization of who God is. Did he then become a believer and a worshiper of the true God of the Jews? Probably not. There's no real evidence that happened here or in history. But he's a pretty fascinating character. If you just go read what was written about him, and most of that stuff was written a fairly substantial period of time after he died. But everything had been chronicled because of the way they operated. And even after the Medo-Persian Empire came in, the Babylonian Empire was gone, but Babylon still existed, and all the pieces and parts thereof were still there. So anyway, that's a story for another time.